Last night I spoke about my grandmother and how she always thought that I looked like the angel on top of her Christmas tree. More than that, she thought that I was an angel. She knew I was human and imperfect, but she always saw the best in me. And I believe that's how God sees us. As humans, we encounter one another's mistakes and growing edges. That's a nice way to put it, as well as the potential evil in the world. So it can often be hard at times for us to see the good in all people. There was one year my parents did not think that I was an angel. They were not in agreement with my grandmother. I was in elementary school, if I remember correctly, and I had a hard time getting up in the morning. That is, to say the least. I struggled mightily. I have to tell you, this feeling didn't necessarily go away, because sometimes as an adult, I wake up in my cozy bed and I say out loud, I don't want to go to school. But back to elementary school. I remember being told that Santa Claus would be paying attention to my behavior in the mornings. I tried my best, but trust me, it was very hard to be good every morning. On Christmas morning, I'm not sure if I considered that Santa might not bring me presents, and everything was going really well. My sister and I had opened all the presents from Santa and our parents, and as usual, we would have breakfast with my grandmother before opening our stockings. When I began to open my stocking, I realized that something was wrong. It looked full, but it didn't feel like it normally would. After taking everything out, I realized, yes, it was indeed full, but not with anything good. It was missing the usual Tic Tacs or chapstick or trinkets I was used to receiving. My stocking contained a package of some socks, a package of some underwear, and a small piece of real coal. I was upset about the extra trinkets or presents I might have missed out on, but mostly embarrassed about that piece of coal. But do not worry, I was very sneaky and reached behind me and hid it under a chair. I thought I had hidden it pretty well. It was out of sight. But somehow, my mom saw it. She said, "What's that? What was that in your stocking?" And she said it so loudly that even my grandmother, who's hard of hearing, could hear. And I was so embarrassed because now Grandma knew that I had been a bad girl. I don't remember exactly how it affected the rest of my day because I was so young when it happened. And I'm confident that Santa and my parents brought me plenty of other presents to play with, and my family came over later that day, so it distracted me from feeling completely terrible. I've talked to my mother about it since, and she says she regrets putting that little piece of coal in. It didn't exactly have the outcome she wanted it to, and it was hard for her to see me sad on Christmas Day. I had to mention that so you wouldn't be angry with my mother at sad little me. It's okay. Of course, it's easy to look at our past decisions or mistakes and say, or want someone else's past decisions and mistakes and say, oh, we would have done better. It's more difficult to make hard decisions in the moment when we don't have the privilege of hindsight guiding our thoughts and actions. I think that was what Martin Luther was getting at during one of his Christmas sermons on this passage from Luke, around the year 1530. I want to read some of it for you today. Maybe you've heard it before, and I obviously have as well, but new things come up every time. Luther talks about all the people who wouldn't help Mary and Joseph when they were in need, and says, "Shame on you, wretched Bethlehem. The inn ought to have burned with brimstone, for even if Mary were a beggar or unwed, anybody, anybody at such a time should have happily given her a hand. We would say, if only I had been there, how quick I would have been to help the baby. Would have washed his linens. How happy I would have been to go with the shepherds to see the Lord lying in the manger. Yes, you would. You say that because you know now how great Christ is. But if you had been there at the time, you would have done no better than the people of Bethlehem. Childish and silly thoughts are these. Why don't you just do it now? You have Christ in your neighbor. You ought to serve your neighbor. For what you do to your neighbor in need, you do to the Lord Christ himself. The sermon just took a little turn, I suppose. We may feel distant from God at times, but it is true. We have Christ in our neighbor. And those we worship with today, and those in our neighborhood where we physically live, and those in the world that we have yet to meet. We have the ability to be Christ to one another, and not just when it is simple or easy. Luther continues in his sermon. Let us then meditate upon the nativity just as we see it happening in our own babies. I would not have you contemplate the deity of Christ, the majesty of Christ, before this moment, his flesh. Look upon the baby Jesus. Divinity may terrify man. Inexpressible majesty will crush him. That is why Christ took on our humanity, except for sin, that he should not terrify us, but rather that with love and favor he should console and confirm. See how God invites you in many ways. He places before you a baby with whom you may take refuge. You cannot fear him, because nothing is more appealing than a baby. Are you affrighted? Then come to him. You will see how great is the divine goodness, which seeks above all else that you should not despair. Trust him. Trust him. Here is the child in whom is salvation. To me, there is no greater consolation given to mankind than this, that Christ became man, a child, a baby, playing in the lap and nursing at the breast of his most gracious mother. Who is there whom this sight would not comfort? Now is overcome the power of sin, death, hell, conscience, and guilt, if you come to see this gurgling baby and believe that he has come not to judge you, but to save you. He has come not to judge you, but to save you. Those words from Luther are powerful and true. We're all human beings that have bad mornings or bad days, and maybe sometimes they lead into bad months or years. We make mistakes. We regret things that we have done and failed to do. On this day and every day, God is at work in and through us to be Christ for one another. Because no matter what we do, we cannot take away the love that God has given us in Jesus Christ. Amen.